The night was colder than any night Evan Hawley had ever lived through. The wind moved through the broken trees like a wounded creature, carrying the smell of smoke, burned metal, and old fear. Evan sat beside a dying fire, watching the last sparks rise into the dark sky. He was a soldier, a human survivor of too many battles, and his face showed the weight of every loss he had ever suffered. His armor was scratched, his hands were bruised, and his heart felt emptier than the silent battlefield around him. Across from him, sitting with her knees pulled to her chest, was Lyra, the alien girl who had once been nothing more than a stranger from an enemy world. The light from the fire touched her silver skin and made it glow softly. Her eyes, large and bright like twin stars, watched the flames as if they carried secrets she wished she understood. The war between humans and her people, the Valari, had broken many things: trust, families, homes, but Lyra believed something inside her had broken much earlier. For hours neither of them spoke. They were both tired, both wounded in ways deeper than the body. They had only met days ago, but the silence between them felt strangely warm, as if the quiet itself was a fragile bridge holding two lonely souls together. Evan shifted slightly, wincing as a dull pain moved up his leg. Lyra turned her head quickly, her glowing eyes widening with worry. She always looked like that whenever she sensed discomfort in him. It was strange to Evan. Most Valari had been trained to fear humans. But Lyra was different. She seemed to fear losing someone more than she feared him. After a long moment, she gathered courage. Her voice, soft like the sound of falling dust, cut through the cold night. "May I sleep beside you tonight, human?" Evan froze. Her words were gentle, but they reached him like a hand touching an old wound. She wasn't asking out of romance. She wasn't asking out of desire. That she was asking because she was lonely, because she was scared, because she needed someone, anyone, to remind her she was not facing the world alone. Evan stared at her, trying to understand the expression on her face. Lyra sat there, small and fragile in the oversized cloak he had given her earlier. She hugged herself tightly, as if afraid he might reject her. Not physically, emotionally, and that kind of rejection hurt more. He didn't answer immediately. He looked at the fire, at the shadows around them, at the broken land that had once been home to both their people. War had taken so much, and maybe, he thought, neither of them had anything left except this moment. Why? He asked softly, because he wanted to hear her reason, not because he doubted her. Lyra lowered her gaze. Her fingers curled into the fabric of her cloak as she struggled to form her thoughts. "When I am alone," she whispered, "my mind remembers too much. The war, the screams, the things I lost. When I sit near you, the noise inside me becomes quiet. I feel safe." The last word trembled as it left her lips. Evan felt something shift in his chest. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. He lived with the same ghosts' memories of friends he couldn't save, of moments he couldn't erase, of nights he couldn't sleep because silence was louder than battle. He looked at her again. Really looked. And he realized something simple but important. She was just a girl. A frightened, lonely girl trying her best to survive a world at war. He nodded slowly, not trusting himself to say much. "Yeah," he said softly. "You can." Lyra's shoulders dropped with relief. She moved closer carefully, respectfully, until she was sitting beside him. Not touching, not clinging, just near enough to feel his warmth. The firelight made her silver skin shimmer faintly, like moonlight reflected on water. She wrapped the blanket he gave her around both of them, creating a small island of warmth in the cold night. Evan felt her trembling calm down slowly. Her breathing softened. Her eyes, once full of fear, now held a quiet kind of peace. As the stars above them flickered through drifting smoke, Evan realized something he had forgotten. Sometimes, even in a broken world, two strangers could make each other feel human again. And in that moment, sitting together beside a dying fire, the war felt a little farther away. The night stretched on, quiet except for the gentle crackle of the fire. Evan watched the flames dance, thinking of the lives lost, the battles fought, and the long, empty nights that had followed each fight. Lyra lay close beside him, her body small and trembling beneath the shared blanket. Even in the darkness, her glowing eyes reflected the firelight like distant stars, revealing fear that words could not fully express. She was young, barely older than a human teenager, yet the horrors she had seen had forced her to grow up faster than any child should. Evan didn't speak at first. He simply listened to the rhythmic sound of her breathing, steady but soft, and felt the quiet closeness of her presence. It was strange for him, after years of war, after seeing so much death, He had learned to keep people at a distance. Trust had always been a dangerous thing, something that could be taken away in a moment by a bullet or a betrayal. But Lyra, she was different. She wasn't asking for trust in the usual sense. She only wanted safety. Something he could give. Something he wanted to give. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Human, why do you not fear me? All your people. They say my kind are enemies, that we bring death." Evan glanced at her, studying her glowing face in the dim light. He wanted to find the right words, words that could explain why he felt differently. "I've seen enough hate," he said slowly. "I've seen humans kill Villari and Villari kill humans. I've seen what it does to everyone. I've learned that fear only makes everything worse. Sometimes it's better to trust." Lyra's eyes flickered, uncertain. "Trust, it is. Fragile. Broken easily." Her hands fidgeted with the edge of the blanket. I do not know how." Evan nodded, understanding more than she could imagine. "I don't know how either," he admitted. I know what it feels like to be alone. And right now, I don't want either of us to feel that way." Her gaze softened. There was a hint of vulnerability there that made his chest tighten. It was strange, almost painful, to realize how deeply he already cared for someone he had known for only a few days. But Lyra carried a weight he recognized, the kind of weight that never fully left you after seeing death too closely. After losing people you couldn't save. She shifted slightly, turning to face him, though keeping a safe distance. "Sometimes at night, when I lie alone, I hear their voices. My family, my friends. Screaming, crying, blaming me for surviving." Her words trembled, and a shiver ran through her small body. "I cannot stop remembering. It hurts more than any wound." Evan reached out slowly, resting a hand near hers on the blanket. Not touching her, just close enough for her to feel the human warmth. "I know that feeling," he said softly. "I've seen friends die in my arms. People I promised to protect. You think you're strong because you survived. But it doesn't feel like strength when it comes with so much pain." She turned her glowing eyes toward him, and for the first time, a faint smile broke across her face. You understand." "I do," he said. "And maybe we can help each other. Tonight, at least, we don't have to be alone. We don't have to be afraid. Sometimes that's enough." Lyra's shoulders relaxed, and the tremble in her hands faded. She curled closer, resting her head near his shoulder, careful not to be a burden. The warmth of his body, the quiet presence of someone who wasn't going to hurt her, wrapped around her like a shield. And for the first time in what felt like years, she let herself breathe without fear. The fire crackled, sending tiny sparks into the cold night air. Evan stared at the glowing embers, thinking about how fragile life was, how quickly everything could be taken away, and how rare it was to find a soul that truly understood you. Lyra's presence reminded him that even in the darkest night, even after countless battles and endless loss, small moments of peace were possible. They were fragile, yes, but they were worth holding on to. She whispered again, almost to herself. "It is easier when someone cares." Evan didn't answer. He only kept his hand nearby, a silent promise that he cared. That he would stay. That he would protect her, not because it was his duty as a soldier, but because it was his choice. And sometimes, in the quiet of a war-torn world, choices mattered more than orders, more than strategy, more than weapons. For the rest of the night, they sat together in silence. No words were needed. Just the firelight, the shared blanket, and the knowledge that, for one night at least, neither of them would face the darkness alone. In the simple act of being beside one another, both human and alien found a small kind of healing, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, survival didn't have to mean suffering alone. And so, beneath the stars and the smoke, a bond formed, not born of trust or loyalty. Not of politics or war, but of shared fear and shared humanity. It was fragile, yes, but it was real. And for the first time in a long while, both Evan and Lyra believed that perhaps the world might still hold something worth protecting. The morning came slowly, pale and fragile like a shy child stepping into a war-torn world. Evan awoke first, the cold of the ruined forest seeping into his bones, and found Lyra still asleep beside him. Her silver skin glowed faintly in the dim light, and her chest rose and fell with slow, even breaths. For a moment, he forgot the pain in his leg, the wounds of the past, and even the war that had followed them like a shadow. He simply watched her, and in that quiet, he felt a strange kind of hope he hadn't dared to feel in a long time, but the forest offered no peace for long. As they began walking toward the human forward base, Evan noticed subtle signs, broken twigs, footprints not far behind them, and a faint mechanical hum in the distance. He froze, eyes scanning the trees. "They're close," he muttered. Lyra stirred, blinking her glowing eyes open. "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling, though only slightly. She trusted him now, but fear still lurked like a shadow behind her confidence. "Rogue Velari," he said, his voice low. "They don't follow the peace. They hunt anyone who sides with humans." Lyra's body stiffened. They will kill me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They hate me now. They hate me for choosing to speak to your people. For being near you." Evan shook his head. "No, I won't let that happen. Not while I can fight." Her gaze softened, almost pained. "But your leg, your body." He smiled faintly, though it did not reach his eyes. "I've survived worse. And I'll survive this too. For you." They moved cautiously, ducking behind ruined walls of concrete and shattered trees, keeping their eyes on the shadows. Then the attack came. Blaster fire cut through the air like angry lightning. Sparks flew as shots hit the broken ground near their feet. Evan shoved Lyra down behind a fallen wall, pressing her close. "Stay down. Don't move," he shouted, his heart hammering. She clutched his arm, trembling. They are too many." "No," he said sharply. "We can outsmart them. We have to." Evan peeked over the rubble and fired. The rogues were fast, trained, and ruthless, but he had survived countless battles. Every shot he fired was precise, calculated, a dance between life and death. But he couldn't afford to ignore Lyra. She was small, unarmed, and too precious to risk. She watched him fight, her glowing eyes wide, and something new stirred inside her, a mix of fear and awe. Humans were strange. Fragile and soft in so many ways, yet capable of courage that burned brighter than any energy weapon. In that moment, Evan was no longer just a soldier. He was hope itself. Lyra whispered to herself, almost as if speaking to the stars. Why does he protect me? I am nothing. Just an alien. He has no reason to care. But Evan did care. He always had. And even as a stray shot grazed his shoulder, drawing blood, he never let her see the pain. Not yet. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the rogue patrol retreated, vanishing into the forest shadows. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burned circuits. Lyra crawled toward him, pressing a trembling hand against his arm. Are you hurt? Evan shrugged, hiding the sting of pain. Just a scratch, he said, though he knew it was more than that. Tears welled in Lyra's eyes. You risked yourself for me. For a human, for me. She said, voice cracking. Why? He looked at her, his gaze soft but fierce. Because you matter, he said simply. Because even in a world full of hate, some things, some people, are worth protecting. You're worth protecting. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to cry, not in fear, not in shame, but in relief. She rested her head against his chest, letting the warmth of his body flow into her, steadying the storm of emotions inside. I never thought anyone could feel this way about me, she whispered. Evan tightened his hold gently. Most people don't. Most people can't. But one choose differently. They stayed like that for several minutes, listening to the wind and the distant hum of the forest. No words were needed. In the aftermath of danger, they had found a moment of connection. A fragile promise had formed between them, one neither had to say aloud to understand. The forest was dangerous, yes. The war was far from over. And the rogue Velari would come again. But in that moment, Evan and Lyra realized that even in the darkness of war, even with enemies hunting them, they were not alone. And for some, that alone could make all the difference in surviving another day. The sun had barely risen when Evan realized the pain in his leg was worse than he had thought. A sharp sting pulsed with each step, and he stumbled over a broken tree root. Lyra noticed immediately, her glowing eyes widening with worry. You are hurt more than you say, she whispered, kneeling beside him. Her small hands hovered over the torn fabric of his pants and the burned armor. Let me help you. Evan shook his head, forcing a weak smile. It's nothing. Just a scratch. We need to keep moving. No, Lyra said firmly, her voice trembling only slightly. You cannot walk like this. You will die if we do not stop. Please, human. Let me help. Her tone left no room for argument. Evan knew he could not refuse her. He sat down heavily on a fallen log, wincing with every movement. Lyra knelt beside him, her hands glowing faintly as she pressed them against the wound. A soft, warm energy spread from her palms, easing the pain and slowing the bleeding. Evan watched her carefully, amazed at her focus. "You're healing me?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite the pain. Lyra nodded, eyes wide and serious. "It is not much. I am not a warrior or a healer. But I can stop the worst of it. You must not die. Not yet, not here. You are important." Evan felt something stir deep inside him. This tiny alien girl, once his enemy, was risking herself to save him. And she spoke as if it mattered, not for duty, not for reward, but because she cared. "You're brave," he whispered, voice cracking slightly. She hesitated, shaking her head. "No, I am afraid. I am always afraid, but I cannot let you die. You saved me before. You saved me from the rogues, from the forest, from the darkness in my mind. I will not leave you." Evan looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. The silver skin, the glowing eyes, the trembling hands, she seemed so small, so fragile, yet inside her was a courage far greater than most soldiers he had ever met. He wanted to tell her it was okay to be afraid, that fear was human, and Valari too, but he could only whisper, "And you. You saved me too, Lyra." Her eyes widened. "Me? How? How could I save you? You are strong, human. You fight. You endure. You are not weak," he said quickly, interrupting her. "You survived this war. You survived everything. And you trust me enough to touch me, to care for me, even when everything else in the galaxy says you should hate humans. That takes more strength than most people can ever understand." Lyra's hands stilled for a moment, and she looked down. A faint blush of silver and blue spread across her skin, a sign of her embarrassment, or maybe something deeper. I never thought anyone could see me like that. Not as just an alien. Not as just a piece of war. You see me as someone who matters." Evan smiled softly, placing a careful hand near hers. "Because you do. You matter to me. And maybe to the future too. If peace has a chance, it is because of people like you. People who risk everything to make it happen." Her breathing grew steady, the tension leaving her shoulders as she worked to finish the weak healing she could offer. Finally, she sat back, exhausted but satisfied. "There," she said softly. "It is better. Not perfect, but enough to survive." Evan tested his legs slowly, wincing but able to stand with her support. "You're amazing," he said quietly. She shook her head, eyes glistening with emotion. "No, you are, and I promise, human. I will stay by your side. I will not leave. Not in the forest. Not in the war. Not anywhere." Evan's chest tightened. He had never felt this way before, so deeply touched by someone's loyalty, courage, and vulnerability all at once. He wanted to tell her he felt the same, that he would never leave her either. But words felt small compared to the bond forming between them. So he simply nodded, letting the silence speak. "I trust you," he said, and it was enough. The sun rose higher, casting pale light across the broken forest. Two survivors, human and alien, stood together, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as companions united by circumstance, by shared fear, and by the fragile hope of something better. And in that quiet moment, amidst the ruins of war, a silent promise was made. They would protect each other, no matter the cost, because in a world that had already taken so much from them, the only thing left worth holding onto was each other. The forest stretched before them, dark and uneven, littered with fallen trees and crumbling debris from battles long past. Every step Evan took reminded him of his injured leg, a dull ache that pulsed with every movement. Lyra stayed close, careful not to crowd him, but close enough that her warmth and steady presence became a constant reassurance. "Are you sure you can walk?" she asked softly, her glowing eyes fixed on his pained expression. "I have to," he replied, forcing a faint smile. "The base is just a few miles ahead. We need to get there." Lyra nodded, and they continued slowly. She leaned on him lightly at times, offering support without words, her small hand brushing his shoulder in silent encouragement. Evan noticed the subtle changes in her posture, the way she tried to appear calm. Yet every now and then, her body trembled slightly, betraying the fear she carried inside. He realized she, like him, had endured more than most could imagine. Hours passed and the forest seemed endless. Every rustle of leaves, every distant crack of a branch, set them both on edge. They were no longer merely travelers. They were fugitives hunted by those who refused peace. The rogue Vilari might strike again at any moment. You humans walk strangely, Lyra said after a while, trying to lighten the tension. So slow, so noisy. Evan chuckled, a soft, tired sound. And you Vilari are too quiet. I keep thinking the forest is empty, and then bam, they're attacking. She smiled faintly, her glowing cheeks flickering with silver and blue. Maybe that is why we survive. By noticing each other in the quiet. Her words stayed with him longer than the sound of her voice. She was right. In the silence, in the moments between danger, they noticed each other. And noticing each other brought comfort, something rare in their war-torn world. At one point, Evan had to stop. The ache in his leg flared sharply, and he sank to a fallen log, breathing heavily. Lyra immediately knelt beside him, worry flooding her glowing eyes. Do not push yourself, she whispered, her hands hovering near him as if afraid to touch. I cannot let you collapse. Not yet, please. He shook his head, giving a small, pained smile. I will be fine, just a moment to rest. Lyra placed her hand on his arm gently, not healing this time, just offering presence. I care for you, Evan. You must understand that. You cannot keep hurting yourself alone. Her words hit him harder than any blaster fire. The intensity in her glowing eyes, the sincerity of her voice, made his chest ache. He realized that this tiny alien girl, who had once been a stranger, was now someone he could not imagine losing. She had become his anchor, his courage, and his reason to endure. I know, he said quietly. And I care for you too. More than I can say. For a brief moment, the forest seemed less threatening, the shadows less menacing. Their hands brushed together as Lyra helped him stand, and they shared a glance that said everything their words could not. Hours later, they reached a small clearing. Evan collapsed near a stream, exhausted but relieved to have found a rare moment of safety. Lyra knelt beside him, offering water from her small canister. We should rest, she said softly. Even heroes must rest, human. He laughed faintly. I'm not a hero. Not really. She shook her head firmly. You are brave, Evan. You fight when it is easier to run. You protect when it is easier to leave. That is heroic. Even if you do not call it so. He looked at her, studying her delicate features, her glowing eyes, the way she held herself despite everything she had been through. She had endured too much, yet she moved forward, never giving up. He realized she was heroic too, her courage quiet, but no less powerful than his own. For a moment, they sat together in silence, sharing warmth, strength, and the quiet understanding that they would survive this journey together. No words were needed. Their bond was already deeper than either could explain. As night approached, Lyra rested her head against his shoulder once more, murmuring softly, even if the world hates us, even if we are hunted, I am glad I am with you. Evan's heart tightened, and he whispered in return, and I am glad you are with me. Always. In the fading light, the forest no longer seemed quite so empty. They were not just survivors anymore. They were companions, allies, something stronger, something human and alien intertwined. A fragile hope in a cruel universe. The forest grew darker with every step. Shadows stretching like claws across the ground. Evan's injured leg burned with every movement, but he refused to slow. Lyra stayed close, her small hand brushing his shoulder occasionally. A constant reminder that they were not alone. They had almost reached the human forward base, a safe place. A haven after days of running and fighting, but danger had followed them relentlessly. The rogue Vilari was still hunting them, enraged by Lyra's choice to side with humans, determined to make her pay. Evan's heart pounded as he scanned the forest. Noticing faint movement, unnatural rustling. A signal that the ambush was near. They're here, he whispered. His voice tense. Lyra's eyes widened, glowing faintly in the dim light. There, so many of them. We cannot fight them all, Evan. Your leg. I don't care, he said, voice sharp but low. We survive, or we die together. I won't let them touch you. Before she could respond, the ambush struck. Blaster fire cut through the air, sparks flying as shots hit trees, dirt, and fallen debris. Evan dove behind a shattered stone wall, dragging Lyra with him. Her hands trembled, but she pressed close, trusting him completely. They want you, she whispered, panic in her voice. They hate you because of me. Evan shook his head, gripping his weapon. No, they hate me because I'm human. They hate me because I protect you. That's why I fight. The rogue Velari advanced, shouting alien words, their weapons aimed and deadly. Evan fired back, every shot precise despite the pain in his leg. He could feel fatigue clawing at him, but the thought of losing Lyra drove him onward. Then one of the rogues charged closer, weapon raised, and Evan stumbled. His leg faltered under the pain, and he fell sideways. Lyra screamed, her voice cutting through the chaos. Without hesitation, she stepped in front of him, her glowing hand spreading light in a brilliant, blinding shield. The blaster shot hit the shield and exploded into sparks, forcing the rogue to recoil. Lyra! Evan shouted, crawling to his knees. No! You cannot. I will not let them harm you. She cried, her voice strong despite exhaustion. You protected me first. Now I protect you. Evan looked at her, awestruck. This tiny alien girl, trembling moments ago, was now standing like a star against the darkness. Her energy shield flickered and strained under the constant assault, but she held it. Her glow bathed the forest in silver light, illuminating every fear, every danger. Every shadow that had haunted them. The rogue Velari hesitated, their numbers dwindling against the brilliance of Lyra's courage and Evan's defense. Traitor! You side with a human? One shouted, voice full of fury. I side with someone who gave me hope, Lyra said, her voice ringing like a bell. I side with someone who saw me as more than a weapon, more than a target. I side with someone who taught me trust. Blaster fire struck her shield again, and she staggered, but Evan rushed to her side. I've got you, he shouted, catching her and steadying her trembling frame. Together, they held firm. Every shot, every step, every moment was a battle not just against the rogues, but against despair, against the hopelessness the war had forced into them. Then, in a final push, the rogue Velari retreated, disappearing into the shadows of the forest. Leaving the clearing silent, except for their ragged breathing, Lyra fell to her knees, her body glowing dimly as exhaustion overtook her. Evan crawled to her side, ignoring the pain in his leg, and took her hands in his. You saved my life, he whispered, voice low and trembling. You saved mine first, she replied, leaning weakly against him. Her glowing eyes flickered faintly, showing a mix of relief, fear, and something softer, trust, care, and something unspoken, yet profound. For a moment, the war, the blood, the pain, and the fear of losing each other vanished. Only the quiet aftermath remained, the fragile peace after the storm. In the silence, both of them understood something deeper than words. They were no longer just human and alien. They were companions, allies, friends, something stronger, born from fire, fear, and unyielding care. Evan gently brushed a lock of glowing silver hair from her face. You're incredible, Lyra, he said softly. I don't know if I'd survive this world without you. She smiled faintly, tears glistening in her glowing eyes. And I would not have survived without you, Evan. You gave me courage. You gave me trust. You made me feel alive again. The forest around them, scarred by war and chaos, seemed calmer somehow. The rogues had retreated, but more importantly, a bond had formed between human and alien stronger than any weapon. Together, they had faced fear, fought back despair, and emerged stronger. For the first time in a long while, both of them felt something the war had not yet stolen. Hope that the world could be better. Hope that they could survive. That hope that they had each other. And in that quiet, trembling moment, they both realized that whatever came next, they would face it together,